Hello, everyone, and welcome to part one of our three-part webinar series, Maximizing Your Life's Work, Making Long-Term Plans for Exiting Your Business. And before we get started here, just a few housekeeping items. My name is Chaz Woodhull. I am a financial advisor and proud CEPA at Northwestern Mutual. And I want to talk a little bit about this webinar series before we get started. So like I mentioned, it's a three-part webinar series produced in concert between the Exit Planning Institute, Sunbelt Business Advisors Midwest, and Northwestern Mutual. And the reason we're doing this is really for you all in the audience, business owners and folks connected to business owners. And it's to educate and empower you all around what may very well be the biggest financial and maybe one of the biggest personal decisions of your life, and that is selling or exiting your business. What you can expect to learn in the series is what to do before, during, and after the exit of your business. And today, we're going to be talking about planning the best possible result for exiting your business. So what to do before. We'll be leaving a few minutes at the end for questions. So if you have any comments or questions along the way, do drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end. But for today's discussion, we're lucky to have Chris Snider joining us. Chris is the CEO of the Exit Planning Institute. He's the award-winning author of Walking to Destiny, 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth, a business strategy book about the value acceleration methodology. Early in his career, Chris worked as a system integrator, supply chain manager, and mergers and acquisition specialist for public companies such as Sherwin-Williams, Price Waterhouse, FedEx, Nike, Dell, Hewlett-Packard, Freightliner, and many others. For Chris Snider, a game-changing milestone in his career came when he began working with a middle-market family-owned business that he helped grow from 90 million to 265 million in 3 years. And the result of that was the sale to a large multinational strategic buyer. For his written work and his contributions to the industry, Chris has been awarded honors that include the 2016 NACVA Industry Titan Architect, 2016 AM and AA Thought Leader of the Year. And in addition to being an award-winning author and sought-after keynote speaker, again, we're very lucky to have him today. Chris is a managing partner of the Snider Premier Growth, CEO again of the Exit Planning Institute, founder of Think Tank Publishing House, and the author of SniderValueIndex.com. And to boot, he is a family business owner himself with his son, Scott Snider. So all in all, Chris, thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Sorry for that technical difficulty, what can you do? Technology.
Yeah, such is life in the COVID and I guess now post-COVID times.
Yeah, but I think those are things that are never going to change now.
Yeah.
If you haven't figured out how to roll with it at this point, then you're probably not going to. Right?
Right. Yeah.
So
without further ado, Chris, let's kind of dive in. I know that as we're dealing with our clients, and as you know, most business owners in the United States, at least those that have employees, are baby boomers. And that generation is approaching retirement, if not already in it. So, how does an owner know if it's the right time to transition?
Yeah, I think that's a question that's on a lot of business owners' minds right now for a lot of different reasons. But it is being driven by what we call the age wave. Baby boomer business owners are now between 57 and I think 75. Within 8 years, all baby boomer business owners will be 65 plus, including me. And why is that important? Well, because they own 2/3 of the privately held businesses. So there's 6 million privately held businesses out there with payroll. So there's 28 million overall. A lot of people are familiar with that stat. They say, Chris, there's not 6 million, there's 28 million. Most of those are holding companies. If you're a business owner, you understand what I'm talking about. You got a holding company, and then that company has many other businesses. But There's 6 million businesses with payroll, so we consider those operating companies, and 4 million out of those 6 million are owned by baby boomers. We estimate that it's worth about $10 trillion of wealth. And the baby boomers are a resilient breed. We're the inventors of the 60-hour work week. We love our work. We love to work. Oftentimes work is a big part of our identity. And we have been resisting the phenomenon of exiting our businesses. We've been holding them longer and longer. And of course, the first 20 years of this century hasn't helped. We've gotten hit by so many things between the financial crisis, the Y2K, and now COVID. It's like, what else could it be? How resilient does a baby boomer have to be, right? So I think what's on a lot of boomers' minds now that looks like we're getting over the hump in most areas of the country with COVID is like, hey, is now the right time? And so that's a question I get a lot. And what I tell business owners is trying to time your exit is not a strategy that I advocate, right? What I advocate is to always have your business in a position to be ready to be sold or exited all the time. So I tell business owners, don't think of exit planning as something you do down the road when you say, okay, well, COVID's over. I'm sick and tired of this. I'm getting out. That's not the time to exit, right? It's sort of like the stock market. You want to sell high. And so you want to always be ready. And there are a few things to figure out, if you are ready. The first, I guess, concept I wanted to just talk about was the difference between readiness and attractiveness. Now, a lot of business owners will talk about that. They'll say, ready, okay, well, what is this? Is this a pun? Is this a play on words? There's a difference between how attractive a business is versus how ready it is to transition, and also how ready the business owner is to transition. So I'll give you an example. Business owner I was working with not too long ago, $33 million gross sales business, $2.5 million bottom line. Sounds pretty attractive, right? I mean, yeah. I wouldn't mind making $2.5 million a year. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I did a valuation for him, and we got done with the valuation, and I knew he wasn't going to like my response, but he asked me, so Chris, what do you think? You've done, dozens, hundreds of these. What do you think my business is worth? And I said, I'd really rather wait till I have a chance to study the data. What I was really thinking is I need to buy myself time to give him the bad news. But he kept pressing the button saying, come on, just tell me what you think. And I said, well, I just don't think your business, Doug, I don't think your business is worth anything. And yeah, he didn't quite give me that reaction. I think it was, first he doubted, that I knew what I was doing. And then I think he got kind of angry, because he got pretty red.
Right.
And then he just said, look, I don't know, how can that be? And what I said is, okay, let's take a look at the business. It is attractive. This business is attractive. It's got good margins. It's producing pretty decent income. Mm-hmm. It's showing some pretty good growth, but it's not ready to transition because here's the backstory. 3 customers made up 80% of the revenue. The business owner bragged to me that he was the best salesperson in the company. He said, maybe there's one other person that's as close to me in sales as I am. I'm like, that's not a good thing, right? So you had a concentration issue. You had an owner dependency issue, right? He was doing no sales and marketing. There really weren't sales and marketing. We were primarily selling to 3 people who were his buddies, right? And nothing was really documented in terms of what was up here in the owner's head. Nothing that we call that structural capital. Nothing was really documented. So I said to him, if we sold the business, what are we selling? Because basically, if that business owner went away, those relationships went away, that know-how went away. And so the business wasn't ready to transition to a new owner. And so that's one of the first things I suggest business owners do is they assess the attractiveness versus the readiness factor to make sure that their business isn't just attractive, but it's also ready to, transition to a new owner. And that new owner could be a third party, but that new owner also could be your son or daughter or your employees or your management, you've got options like that. But I tell an owner, like, if your business isn't, ready to transition or isn't attractive to a independent third party, why would you think it'd be attractive to your son or daughter? Right.
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 And on top of that, I mean, why would you want to straddle a company that isn't ready onto your family members?
Yeah.
Then it's, you're not doing a service to them at all. But when you're thinking about attractiveness and readiness, what's the biggest consequence, if there's any consequence, when taking an attractive business that might not be ready to market?
Yeah. So what happens is, and just think about it, is what happens is I got a business that's producing decent income. It looks attractive. And I take it to market, because when the buyer comes in, the buyer's going to, is only going to see the surface of things, right? They don't look under the hood of the car, right? I got a nice bright red shiny Mustang, it looks beautiful from the outside, but I haven't lifted the hood yet.
Right.
When you put your business up for sale, there's something called due diligence. Once the buyer gets interested, or buyers, in an ideal situation, you'll have multiple people bidding on your business. What'll happen is they'll come in and they they give you what they call a letter of intent. If it gets that far, starts out with an expression of interest, then a letter of intent, and once the letter of intent is agreed upon, which is basically their offer to purchase, you go into a due diligence process. That due diligence process lasts 60 to 90 days usually, and it's they're digging through everything. I mean, it's as an owner, it's very invasive, right? I mean, they're going in, they're looking at all your books, they're looking at your customers, they're learning everything they can about your business. And if you're dealing with a really astute buyer, which a lot of the buyers in the market now are I mean, they're going to rip it apart. Right. And they're looking for reasons to lower the price and change the terms. So what happens is they say, wow, this business looked good when we first made the offer. Now that we're looking at it, now we see that you have a concentration issue. That's a risk. Now we see that we have an owner dependence issue. That's a risk. Now we see that, the only good salesperson in the company is the owner. The other people are average. That's a risk. Right. Now I don't know if I could duplicate what the owner was doing, because the owner didn't document anything he or she was doing. So how am I supposed to know what to do? Right. So all of these things in the eyes of the buyer are risks. And what happens is, when there are risks, when the risks go up, or risks are identified by a buyer, what the buyer is going to do is, one, they're going to walk away from the deal, and you just wasted a lot of time and money. Mm-hmm. Two, even if they stay in, they're going to say, well, now that the risk is higher than it's not really what I thought it was. You don't have any of this stuff to transition the business. So what I need to do is shift the risk. So what they're going to do is shift the terms back over to the seller, in the things in form of like seller financing or an earn out, or the things called holdbacks.
Sure.
To kind of, make sure that there's not a risk. So they might say, okay, well, we're going to hold back 20 or 25% of the offer to make sure that these customers transition properly. And so you don't see that money for a year from now or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or they ask you to finance the deal. And basically what they're doing, or they may lower the price as well, right? Mm-hmm. So they're saying, look, I'm not going to get the same return because I have this, since I have more risk, I need a higher return. Therefore, I need to pay less. So what happens is it shifts back against the seller, which is exactly what you didn't want to happen, right? Because once you sell a business, it's, take your business to market, it gets a lot of exposure. And although, people are very professional and try to, maintain the confidentiality, it's also very disruptive to your business, processes, and to your, to the business itself. And so you really don't want to go. So my point to the business owners is, look, even if you have an attractive business, you need to make sure that you're ready to transition, so that when we push the go button and we go out, somebody like Sunbelt takes your business to market, what you want to be able to do is move through that process fast, right? And you don't want to be looking around, lifting paperwork, where's this, where's that? And you want to have all of that stuff together. And we call that being ready. The other aspect, Chaz, is the personal side. Owners frequently, misunderstand how important the personal side is. to being prepared. The number one reason deals don't close, do you know what it is?
Tell us.
Okay. It's seller cold feet. So you get all the way through the deal process, right? You're attractive, you're ready, you go forward, and you get to the deal, and you start sinking in like, I'm losing my baby here.
Right.
And this has been a big part of my identity in my life. Do I have enough money? Is my selling price high enough that I'm going to be comfortable? All this doubt comes into your mind. And the number one reason deals don't close is not really because of due diligence. It's because owners, when they're facing the fact that they're going to move into the next act of their life, basically transition their business, even if they get the money, they're afraid to do it because they don't know what they're going to do next.
Right.
So not only do you have to have your business ready, you have to be personally ready to be able to get over that emotional hump that it takes to actually exit the business.
Yeah. Well, we see that a lot because, you got John or Jill Doe, and they are president of Acme Tool for 30 years. That's who they are. They're John or Jill Doe, president of Acme Tool. And when that goes away, the motivator and the purpose of why they got out of bed for the last 30 years is gone. Yeah. And so what's critical in our process is we're having conversations with our clients is who is John or Jill Doe without the title?
Right.
What's going to get you out of bed now? And so we've seen that too. And it's critical in our process. So,
well, funny story, and it's in my book, and I just thinking about it because I was doing an interview earlier, and they asked me about it to share the story, and I got a call from an attorney friend of mine who asked me to. He says, "Hey, I've got a client, and they're quote ready to exit their business."
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I get that call, I chuckle a little bit because I say, "Well, what makes you think they're ready?" And he says, "Well, they're 65 and they want to retire." And I'm like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're ready, right? So we go in, we meet them in the conference room, the husband and the wife are there, and so I'm saying, "Hey, congratulations, you got to the point where you're ready to sell your business." And we're talking about what it might be worth and things like that. The first thing he says, "Yeah, I can't wait to sell the business and move to Colorado." And I said, "Well, what makes you think your business is saleable?" And that was the first question it kind of gave him. He just assumed his business was saleable, right?
Right.
And then I said, "Well, let's say it is saleable. What are you going to do when you get to Colorado?" He said, "Well, we're so excited. We found this land up in the Rockies. We're going to build a log home up there. My wife and I are going to go live there. It's going to be awesome." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been to the Rockies. Rockies is awesome. What are you going to do when you get there?" He says, "I just told you, we're going to build a log home. We're going to retire." I'm like, "Yeah, but what are you going to do when you get there?" Now he's getting a little irritated, right? He's like, and his wife, she's not smiling anymore because I keep asking him the same question. But the point I was trying to make to him is, I said to him, "Look," I said, "how many hours a week do you work in your business?" He said, 60, 70 hours a week. I said, "Well, how long have you been doing it?" He says, 30, 35 years, for a long time.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, what are you going to do when you get to Colorado and you got all that time to fill? Like, you can only fish and hunt and hike so much." You know what I mean?
Right.
Business owners are used to being busy people, and we want to be busy to be fulfilled. We want to do fulfilled activities. And so it's really important that business owner really think about that, because when that day comes, you think you're going to sign that purchase agreement,
Mm-hmm.
But from not most cases, but if the deal's going to go south, the good chance it's going to go south because you're just going to get to a point you're going to go like, "I can't do this. I don't know what I'm going to do."
Right. So, we're talking about attractiveness and readiness, and we talked about personal readiness and some of the aspects of business readiness. But in general, how does a business owner know whether or not they are ready? Because as we know, as CEPAs, most businesses are not ready for sale. So what are some of the things that business owners need to look for to know that they're ready to exit, they're ready to go to market?
Yeah, and maybe just for a little education for the folks that are on the call here, a CEPA is a certified exit planning advisor. This is a credential that my organization, the Exit Planning Institute, offers to people like Chaz and the folks at Sunbelt, and they go through a week-long course and have to pass a test and agree to a code of ethics. I have so many business owners come to me and say, I didn't even know somebody like that existed, right? They do exist. They're called certified exit planning advisors, and they're there to help you with these things, and they have a lot of experience. Most business owners are very smart people, and they're good, genuine people who contribute to their communities, but most of them have never exited a business. So they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And the idea of the certified exit planning advisors, that's a person that has helped multiple people exit. They can come in and bring a team of people to help you do it the right way. So what you want to do is on the front end, and you guys can read about it in Walk into Destiny. I'm not plugging the book, but you can read about it if you want. I created a process called the Value Acceleration Methodology. It's a 3-gate process designed to help you plan for your exit, but not just plan for your exit, but it will add value to your business. It will add profits and improve your revenues today. And just, you don't have to take my word for it. Go buy it and look and read it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But the idea, the first step of the process is to identify what you already have. And we in our neck of the woods, we call that a triggering event, because most people understand a triggering event is something that triggers action, right? And what I found is that if I could get an owner to go through that with me, 70% of the time they went forward with action, which is why I called it the trigger. My company actually calls it like an enterprise value assessment. What we do is score the business from a person and the owner from a personal, financial, and business standpoint. And then we correlate that to a concept I call the range of value. And I think this is important for business owners to understand this concept. In every market, there is what I call a range of value in your industry. And by that, I'm meaning companies will trade at a multiple of earnings or EBITDA in your industry. Some companies might trade at a low of 3 times EBITDA. Other companies might trade as high as 10 times EBITDA. So the question all the time is like, well, how do I know where I fall in that range? And the idea is you do this scoring, this assessment, and then based on the score of the assessment, I can correlate you into this range. So I can tell you, you scored average, and therefore you're going to get an average multiple. What may be more valuable is like, if I'm scoring average or below average, I can tell you specifically what triggers you have to work on to drive the value of your business up, right? Unfortunately, probably 70, 80% of the time, I'm coming back to business owners and telling them their business is worth nothing. And they're shocked by that, like that one owner was, because they're scoring so low. There's so many missing factors to the business being ready to transition that they have a lot of work to do. Occasionally, I run into a business that's in a premium class or a best-in-class business. And in those cases, sometimes we still don't exit. We end up buying other companies because we know that there's a lot of synergy we can create. The point is, it's much too much to talk about in this particular webinar, but the point is for the business owner to know what their value is and their potential value and not guess at it. Because you can then build, once you know what that number is, what you're going to do is you're going to correlate that number, your business value, to what it is you need in terms of total wealth to support your lifestyle with and without the business. And we call that the wealth goal. So the wealth goal minus the wealth you have outside the business is something we call the wealth gap. And what we're going to do is somebody like you would come in, help the owner identify the wealth gap. And then somebody like me would come in and I would tell you, here's the value of the business. And if we're got our fingers crossed, if we've done our work, right, the gap that I've got between what I have and what I need is going to be filled by the business.
Right.
But most of the time, what we find is that the business does not fill that gap. Owners have these huge wealth gaps because they have nice lifestyles. And the only way they can close their wealth gap is to harvest the wealth in the business. And we know statistically that only 20% of the businesses that go to market actually result in a sale. On the family side, only about 30% of the family businesses successfully transition into the second generation. And it goes down to 14% at the third generation and only 4% by the fourth generation. So your odds of successfully exiting your business are roughly about 1 in 4. Those aren't great odds, right? So we're saying 3 out of 4 business owners that are on this call right now are probably not going to be able to harvest their wealth. And so what I'm encouraging them to do is do this readiness assessment on the front end to find out where you stand and how, what you need to do to get the business ready and to get yourself ready to have a successful transition. Because it's certainly worth it, because about 80% of a business owner's wealth is locked up in their business.
Yeah. Yeah. And that reminds me, you write about in your book, Walking to Destiny, about business owners being trapped in their business. And it sounds like, 3 out of those 4 business owners, they can't harvest their wealth, but they need the income from the business to continue to live, which we know is often the case. That sounds like a situation where they're trapped. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that and how we can get out of that?
Yeah, so here's what happens. I call it like the paycheck fallacy, right?
Right.
What happens is you've got your business, and if you got a decent business, it's producing a nice income, right? And most business owners, if they've had their business more than 10 years, the business is basically the livelihood, right?
Yeah.
I know I take a small salary, and at the end of the year, if the business has done well, I take a bonus, right?
Exactly.
If the business is not done very well, I take a smaller bonus or no bonus, right?
Sure.
And so we've learned to basically our business as private business owners becomes our income.
Right.
And what happens is, think about it, if I'm producing a pretty nice income and then I sell the business and I'm only earning 4, 5, 6% on the balance of the portfolio, well, that's not going to cover the money I was making before I exited the business.
Right.
Right. And so now I've got an income shortfall. That's why we want to do all this work on the front end to understand what your income needs are. But what happens is the business owner looks at it and says, well, one, I can sell it, but I can't sell it for enough that'll get me enough money that I could live the way I live today for the rest of my life. Or two, as we said, in most cases, in 80% of the cases, the result is that the business isn't worth anything because it can't be sold.
Mm-hmm.
And so the business owners are like, well, if I can't harvest the wealth that I have locked in my business, well, then I can't sell the business because I need that salary.
Right.
So they end up sort of stuck, in the business. And then I just feel like what happens is, if you're not, and it's just my philosophy, I think business owners would, if you're not working and growing your business is dying, right? And so they get to a point where they lose the energy, they lose some enthusiasm, they're pulling money out, things are status quo, and they're not really investing anymore. And eventually it just dwindles down to where eventually it just gets shut down. And it doesn't have to be that way. When I studied this, I was shocked to learn some of these statistics, but when I studied it, I didn't study the 80% that weren't successful. I studied the 20% that were. Right. It's half full. So I'm like, well, I don't care about the 80. What I want to know is those 20 that were able to harvest, what the heck did they do?
Right.
Can we copy can we do what they did? And that's how I came up with my book and my book is, based on those concepts and also a process that I found that those business owners who were successful, not just to harvest the wealth, but also move on to the best act of their life. Mm-hmm. What did they do? What were those common characteristics? Yeah.
Yeah. A story that you shared with me before is the pool table story. Do you mind sharing that real quick?
Yeah, this was recent, actually. I think we just talked about this because my son and I, so just for all the owners, I'm also a business owner, just like you, and have the same challenges, just like you. And my son is my successor. He was just named president this week, as a matter of fact. And that's been a transition we've had going on. I'm not leaving the business, but it's time for some new, fresh thinking and leadership. And I've been working with my son's been working at EPI since we bought it 2012. And he and I have been working together for 18 years, believe it or not. So, I always tell our members, you're witnessing a live family transition. So anyway, so he and I, we do a lot of stuff together as a father-son team. And we were speaking to a peer group a couple of months ago. And we were talking about the importance of personal planning, not just business planning.
Right.
And, sometimes you don't know if your message resonates or not. But about 2 weeks went by, and one of the owners that was on that webinar called my son up, chased my son down here at the office, called him up. It was 9:30, I think, on 9:30 in the morning on like a Tuesday. And he called my son. He says, I just had to call you because I listened to that webinar you and your dad did on the importance of personal planning a couple of weeks ago. And I sold my business last year for $42 million. So I have a lot of money, but I'm divorced and my children are grown. It's Tuesday morning, 9:30 in the morning, and I am down my basement playing pool all by myself because I have nothing to do. And he said, I just thought of you guys and what you were saying in your webinar about the importance of personal planning, because it just hit me this morning and I just had to pick up the phone and call you up. And so it's just sort of here's a guy that's got obviously a lot of money, very smart guy, but he's bored out of his mind in just a year because he really didn't think about what he wanted to do next.
Right. You kind of getting back to, thinking about building the team. I know you mentioned that as CEPAs, when we engage with clients, we build a team. Talk a little bit about some of the key advisors that business owners need on their team to get this process going or to answer some of the questions that they may need answered to get the process going. That's
a great question, and it's a topic I really like to talk to owners about because I think it gets sometimes a little bit overwhelming and intimidating to them.
Yeah.
When we start to explain the army of advisors they need to bring in. I mean, our owners already hate consultants, and now they got to bring in all these advisors. But there is a way to do this. First of all, bring in the right people. I had a client. They weren't a client, but I was on their board. I was talking to the father and the son, and I guess they had I forget, there was a proposal or something in, and they said, we brought in a lot of consultants here, and we never implement their stuff. And I said, well, either you're bringing in the wrong consultants or you guys don't know how to execute. I mean, one of the two. It's like, why are you bringing in all these consultants if you're never taking their advice? But so maybe they weren't bringing in the right people. This is why we have the credentialing program, right? So you can pick the right people, and that they're trained properly. But I go back to the question that you asked. What was the question again?
The team of advisors.
The team. Okay, so the team. So the team here is, I like to talk about owners, explain to the owners in 3 important points I like to make. One is there's what I call the left side of the equation, which is the pre-transaction advisors. And I'm just going to focus on the advisors. Obviously, there's a management, there's employees, there's family that's also on the team. But I'm just talking about the advisors. Those are your commercial banker, your CPA, your business attorney, maybe your estate planning attorney, your insurance provider, right? Your wealth manager. You should have one if you don't have one. And these are the people that are working with you before you even exit. Their job is to help you operate the business. And if they're doing their job right, they're helping you operate a growing business, right? Mm-hmm. Then there's the right side of the equation, which are all the transaction people.
Right.
And there's roughly about 7 different ways to exit your business and hundreds of hybrid options. But these are all specialists. So there's somebody like Sunbelt, for example, that specializes in selling businesses, right? But you also have other exits such as ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, where you sell the business to the employees, where you can sell it to your management, or you sell it to family, right? Or you can sell it to a private equity, those kinds of options. So you have a lot of different options. Those are the two sets of advisors. So what I'm trying to do is get your commercial banker, your CPA, your attorneys, and your insurance professional, and your wealth managers should be working with you on the front end of this thing to help you get this business ready. So when you approach somebody like a Sunbelt, they're going to look at it and say, great, I could sell this at a premium. Now, sometimes somebody like a Sunbelt, they'll dip their toe in on this other side of the equation, because who better to ask what my business would sell for than somebody who sells businesses, right?
Right.
I mean, so that's how I sort of got into it, is I was selling businesses and growing them. And I would go into an owner and say, look, I could, first of all, is the business saleable? One, yes. Okay. What would it sell for today? What would it sell for if we do these things? Right. And then I would work with the business owner to get them through that whole process. But I mean, the team includes all these different advisors. And a lot of times the business owner looks at that and says, God, how expensive is all this going to be? Who's going to manage all these people? Because again, you already have family, employees, customers, suppliers. So I usually tell the owner to hire a quarterback or somebody, to think of it as a program or project manager, as somebody to come in. And that's kind of the role that I fulfill these days, is they come in and they oversee that aspect of the advisors that are necessary. Now, the advisors don't work for them, but somebody needs to manage the overall process, so that you can say, we use value acceleration, and everybody's got a role where they move in and out of that process, and it can be planned and it can be controlled, right? And it can be budgeted for. Right. The next question I usually get is like, well, what do I budget? And what I'll typically tell a business owner is that they should budget, generally it's about 1% to 2% of the value of their business pre-transaction. It'll cost you probably about 5% to transact, right? So if you're going to sell it or transfer it to employees, or figure about 5% of the value to do that. But you really should be spending 1% or 2% to get it ready, right? Now that sounds like a lot of money. I had a customer not too long ago, and he had a $30 million business. And I said, before we get started, I want you to be prepared. I'm sitting there with he and his son, and I said, I want you to be prepared. I'm going to want you to spend about $300,000 to get the business ready. And I saw the son's Adam's apple move up and down, because obviously that's a big number, right? He's swallowing like, geez. And dad sat there, poker faced. And I said, let me explain. You got a $30 million asset here that's illiquid. And what did you think you were going to have to spend to liquidate the asset? And he said, I didn't even think about it. I hadn't thought about what I would have to do to get it into a position where you could liquidate it, right? And so if I said to him, I said, if I asked you to spend $30 million or $300,000 to get 30 million, I think most of us would probably do it, right? Right. So even 1% is not really, a large amount of money, even though it might seem like it up front. The concern really should be, or the question the owner should really be asking themselves is, am I confident that this person sitting across from me, that if I pay $300,000 to all these advisors, and this person is my quarterback leading the team, am I confident they're going to generate that $30 million? That's really the question you need to ask. It's not about 300. It's really about confidence in your advisors. And so you really need a good process of putting together your transition team, really, vetting them very well, and bringing on people who know how to do this stuff, because you can't afford to make a mistake.
No. Well, I mean, as you know, most business owners are, you don't get a second chance. And with something that's as important as your business, for a lot of people, especially if it's a family-owned company, this is their legacy. And, that's an investment in making sure the transition of your legacy, whether it be to a strategic buyer or, an internal to key management or employees or family members, the stewardship of your legacy and what you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into for 20, 30 years, 1% of the value is a small price to pay to ensure that that legacy is stewarded the way that you want.
Yeah, here's an interesting statistic, and you probably have seen this through some of we do something called state of owner readiness research studies. If you wanted to look at any of our studies, you go to www.ownerreadiness.com, and all of our studies are out there. They're interesting stuff, and we've surveyed thousands of business owners. And one of the things that's interesting in almost every survey we do, 99% of the owners that take the survey agree with this statement: having a transition strategy is important to my future as well as the future of my business. 99 out of 100 business owners would agree with that statement. Yet those same business owners, only 17% of them have a written plan, transition plan, and 49% of them admit they've done no planning at all for what's likely the biggest event of their life. And I'm not just talking about financial event, but emotional event, right? Is exiting your business. And it doesn't make sense, right? 99% agree, but less than around half haven't even planned for it. And I think it's because they don't know what they don't know. To your point, most business owners have never exited a business, and they just don't understand how challenging it is. It's harder, in my opinion, than starting a business, is exiting it with your wealth and doing it right. It takes time, takes the right kind of advisors, takes a little bit of investment in order to make it happen. But it has this huge payoff, right? It's so worth it to do it. But I always say that you need two things to really do an exit well. You need growth and you need time, right? So if you have time, you can do it, you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it, chunks at a time, right? You're giving up control over a period of time. You have time to mentor people, or, maybe get a second bite of the apple. But the other part of business that's really exiting that's important is growth. You need a growing, thriving business for it to be attractive and be ready, right? And so growth and time is really what you're after. If you have growth and time, you can have a very, very successful exit from your business.
Well, Chris, this makes me think, we've been talking about value exploration and range of value and readiness versus attractiveness. When owners are thinking about getting engaged into this process, what's the first step to dip their toe in and to see if, going this route is right for them?
I get that question a lot. So, and I get the question is usually posed to me, like, if you could tell the owner to do one thing, what would you tell them to do? And it's hard. It's such a complicated thing to say one thing. And this is going to sound almost like a setup, but trust me, it's not a setup. Okay. The one thing you should do is you should get that enterprise value assessment done on the front end, the valuation. And because what you want to do is you want to know where you stand. This is too important to guess, right? I mean, maybe you talk to your buddy and, he or she sold their business, for $14 million or $10 million or $2 million. And your business is similar. Not the same. You have to get a formal assessment done to make it happen. And it's going to give you the facts. And you want to make these decisions based on the facts. So the first thing I would recommend you do is you get a valuation done. And I'll tell you, not enough owners are doing it. In our surveys, only about 15% of the owners told us that only about 15% have had a formal valuation done in the last 2 years. And that's a big mistake, because the process starts with valuation. Find out where you are from an independent party, but also make sure that they give you the details behind the valuation. You want to know why you were valued here and what your potential is. Right. The other thing I would say to a business owner is shift your thinking to focusing on your business's value versus your business's income. And then the final thing is, don't forget about the personal side. Yeah. It will definitely come into play. You don't think it will, but I'm telling you, it'll come into play once you get down the road. And as an owner myself, who is going through a transition process, it takes a long time to figure out, and a lot of soul searching to figure out what you want to do next with all this time you're going to have. Yeah.
So it almost sounds like the enterprise valuation is kind of like a home inspection. if you're going to buy a home, you got to get the home inspection.
Yeah.
And that will give you a list of, maybe DIY projects you got to do if you're going to buy that house to take care of. And the enterprise valuation will say, well, here are the things that you need to work on to make sure that you can get the most out of your business.
Yeah, that's that's an excellent point, because you think, what's a home inspection cost? $300? I don't know.
Yeah, it's $300-$500, something like that. Yeah.
Most people, they put their house on the market, they get a purchase offer, and then the buyer brings the inspector in to have, to get the inspection done. And then the inspector finds all these things, and what happens? The buyer wants the price reduced, or they want these things fixed. Why? Because the risk went up.
Yep.
And I think that's a great point. I've done this myself. It's like, why wait I'm going to do it before the buyer comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So I can choose to get those things fixed in advance, right?
Right.
Before the buyer comes in, and it's done on my terms, not done on their terms. And that is basically, in essence, the point. You need to know more than the buyer at all times. Like when I'm representing a seller, for example, Sunbelt, when they're representing, you've got to know more than the buyer at all times. So when the buyer comes in, there isn't going to be any surprise. I would look at my clients and straight in the eye and say, nobody's going to lowball us or not give us a fair offer, because we've done our homework and we know what this business is worth. And they're not going to find anything that we haven't already found ourselves.
Right.
So, yeah, it's good advice.
So I know that we've got just a couple minutes left, and I know I wanted to leave time for questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box for any participants who have questions. But until we get any, I guess Chris, we can just keep talking. You mentioned the personal readiness. I had a prospective client who's a manufacturer in the Midwest, and they were looking to exit the business. The owner was about 68 years old. His wife was, aging, and he really had to take care of her, but they hadn't done a whole lot of personal financial planning along the way, and he was really dependent on the company for their income. So we drove out to their facility and had a meeting with them and his two kids who work at the company. And what we found in that conversation was the owner was ready. He was more than ready to exit the company, but the two kids weren't quite ready to shoulder that burden because they hadn't had the conversation as a family. How frequently do you see things like that where, especially if it's a family transition, you can't just think about, is the owner ready, but is the person who's going to be taking over the company, are they ready?
Yeah, and it's not just even family is a good example, but it could be employees too, or management.
Yeah,
you're selling to one of those. The thing is, what we talk about is you have inside options and outside options. So outside options is where you sell the business to somebody on the outside, like a private equity company or a strategic buyer, right? Inside options are options where you sell it to somebody inside, like a family member or a management team or employees, or maybe your partner.
Right.
And so sometimes the business owners say, well, I don't have to do all this stuff because I'm not selling to a third party. But in fact, they do a lot of damage because they haven't done the work to make sure that it's successful on an inside sale. Mm-hmm. Usually on an inside sale, there's not a big liquidity event on the front end because the management team, the family members, or the employees, they don't have money to pay, right? Where's their money coming from? They don't have any money. So you have to borrow money. And or the owner has to do seller financing. Mm-hmm. Now they've got themselves in a situation where if you haven't prepared your successor properly, and you're now stepping out of the business and you're dependent on them to run the business,
right?
And you're not going to get paid unless they're successful, right? To me, that's a lot of risk. You've got to make sure that your successor is really prepared. And, it takes a long time. I'm talking 3-5 years to get somebody really prepared. And there's a process for, how to do that as well and a way to test it. The problem is, like, you pick somebody and you work them, you get them into situations. You might go a year or two before you find out that they're not the successor, and then you're starting up again,
Right.
So it's really, we would use this process, this value acceleration process, in family situations as well as third-party situations to help, to your point, help develop the successor and put them through. So now they're taking over the business and they're running the business the same way mom or dad did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe even better.
Maybe. Well, I know that we have about 8 minutes left until we're scheduled to end, and we figured that if we didn't have any questions, we'd give you all a few minutes back. But first of all, Chris, I want to thank you for speaking with us today and joining us. I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining. And, also I'd like to thank Sunbelt for, working with us over the past couple of months for helping put this together. We hope you all really enjoyed today's discussion and learned something valuable that hopefully you'll take with you in your personal and business life, maybe even implement some of the ideas or thoughts that we shared with you today. And if you did enjoy it, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is just part 1 of 3. So join us next time. We'll be actually speaking with Chris Jones, who's the president of Sunbelt Business Advisors Midwest, and Kirill Gurminsky, who's a mergers and acquisitions associate at Sunbelt. And we'll be talking with them about how to maximize the return on your life's work through the actual sale portion, right? So today was pre-sale. Next time is going to be during the sale process. And if you did enjoy today's conversation, spread the word to friends, colleagues. You never know who might be looking for just this sort of information. And, together, the audience, all of you and us, together, we can help the people that you care about and the people that would be tremendous. So thank you all again for joining us. And we'll see you next Tuesday, June 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern time for part 2.